Hey everyone, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. Um, Today we have a special guest, Daniel, who has been entertaining us already by asking about money songs. I was trying to think of a couple, but you guys all got it. But once again, we'd just like to thank all of you for joining us for the OCPS financial aid meeting tonight. We're going to go over an overview so all of you guys can be ready for October 1st when FAFSA opens up. So once again, we'd like to thank you guys, and I'm going to hand it over to Daniel.
Thank you, Keisha, so much. And thank you to Orange County Public Schools for the invitation and the opportunity to be with you tonight. I am so happy to be spending the next 6 hours with you talking about everything you need to know about financial aid to get yourself ready. I'm only kidding. We're not going to spend 6 hours together, although we could if you want to. But my plan tonight is to, in about 90 minutes, give you some really good information about financial aid, get you ready for the coming year, and give you a lot of good details. So here's my promise. By the end of the evening tonight, you will have my email address. So if you have questions, if there are things we didn't cover tonight, if you need to reach me because your circumstance is personal and it's something unique, you'll know how to reach me and you'll know how to be in touch with me. But I want to make sure the next hour and a half is useful for you. So as we go through tonight, if you have questions, please feel free to raise them in the chat. I will also be asking some questions as we go through this evening and asking for you to respond in the chat because it gives me a good opportunity to hear from you. I'll also tell you where you can find a copy of the presentation. And Keisha can answer this question. I believe the recording will be shared after tonight. I know last year when I did this, it was also posted on YouTube at the Orange County YouTube channel. So Orange County Public Schools YouTube channel. So I imagine something similar will happen this year as well. So
It is being recorded.
Great.
It is being recorded and will be posted in all of those places. We do ask that everybody keep themselves on mute so that Daniel can keep the show going.
Wonderful, and I promise it will be a show. It won't quite be as entertaining as local sports or Broadway theater, but hopefully I'll have you at least laughing in some places. So with that, let us dive in. And I promised you $1 million. So if I had $1 million, it's in the top right corner of this PowerPoint presentation. It's what I call Daniel dollars. So there's my $1 million gift to all of you. Hopefully the information you get tonight will be priceless, but that's the $1 million bill right there. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to cover what is financial aid, where does the financial aid come from, how do we determine what you're eligible for, and when and how should you apply for financial aid? Those are really our 4 topics this evening. So to start, let me tell you a little bit about myself, because you heard I'm at Valencia, but who am I? So I am a financial aid professional who's worked for over 30 years in financial aid institutions or institutions providing financial aid services. So I've worked at public institutions and private institutions, undergraduate and graduate schools, small schools, large schools. Some of my past roles included I was director of financial aid at MIT in Cambridge. I was dean of financial aid at Columbia University in the city of New York, working with the Columbia College and the School of Engineering. When I arrived in Florida about 6 years ago, I went to work for St. John's River State College. And about 4 years ago, I transitioned to my role at Valencia College, where I am the Assistant Vice President for Financial Aid and Veterans Affairs. So I oversee financial aid and veterans affairs for Valencia and all of our students in our campuses around Orange and Osceola County. So the other thing I want to say is I'm also the keeper of an excellent resource for you. So please feel free to check out and bookmark moneymanblog.com. Moneyman Blog is the blog that I keep on financial aid. It's not Valencia specific. It's about financial aid in general, and it's written really for families, for you, to learn about financial aid, to understand a little more about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and what's changing and what the situations are. And I apologize. if you hear the sound of my dogs in the background. In the world we live in and the virtual world we're now living in, I'm sitting at home. So my dogs are going to respond to sounds outside. So I apologize. But feel free to visit Moneyman blog. And as we go through tonight, you'll see I will list on some slides, if you want more information, where to find it on Moneyman blog. Because even though we'll be together about 90 minutes, we could spend literally 6 hours talking about financial aid. So there's a lot of good information at that Moneyman blog site. Okay, so I have some questions for you all to help me make sure that the information I'm giving you is as helpful as possible. There are 100 or so of you, and if we were a smaller group and we had more time, I'd hear each of your stories, but unfortunately we don't. So here's a couple of questions. Number one, first question, are you a parent or a student? And what year in high school are you? If you're the student, are you a senior? Are you a junior? If you're the parent, are you the parent of a senior, parent of a junior? What is your status? So great. So I'm seeing parents of seniors, some juniors, some sophomores. Great. Perfect. Okay. So majority of you, some freshmen. That's wonderful. We're glad you're here. It's early, but that's great. So this is helpful for me to make sure that I am meeting the needs you have for information. Okay. So for those of you that are seniors, or if you're the parent of a senior, here's the next question for you. Name some colleges that you're thinking of attending. Just go ahead and type some names in the chat. So I see UCF, Ave Maria University, UF, FSU, Princeton, Harvard, University of Tampa, Yale, UF, Colorado, Oregon. Great. There are a lot of F schools. That's my usual joke. So UF, UCF, FSU, VU, which I'm assuming, Aaron, is Vanderbilt, St. Leo. Okay, great. Perfect. So here's the next question. How much do those colleges cost? What is the cost at a Harvard University, for example? What's the cost at a Rollins or a Stetson? Christine says the cost is a lot. Good answer. Money, $1 million. Too much. Yeah, okay. A mortgage, a lot, don't know. Great, so that's why we're here tonight, right? Is to understand what the cost is. Those are all very honest and appropriate answers, right? And the third question, you don't have to answer this one, but just to think about how you're going to pay for it, right? So the goal of tonight is to answer this third question, to help you understand the how you're going to pay for it question. That's really what we're after tonight, is to figure that out together. So let's dive in. Here's the first piece of good news. There's a lot of money out there, right? Although college costs a lot, there's a lot of money out there available. And in fact, in 2019-20, so not last year, but the year before, in 2019-20, there was over $196 billion with a B given out in undergraduate financial aid across the country. That didn't include emergency relief because of COVID. That was just the basic financial aid money. There was even more money given out because of emergency relief. So let's look at that money. If you look at the pie chart, you'll see how this money is broken out. And you'll see that, the largest slice of the pie is institutional grants. That's about 28% of the funding that's available nationwide is available in the form of grants from colleges and universities. That's really important because what that means is colleges and universities themselves are providing more grant money than really any other source on its own, right? You can see, for example, that if you look at the purple section, which I'll take my mouse and sort of circle around the purple section, state grants are only 6% of the funding that's available nationwide. So that would be funding from the state of Florida, like Bright Futures. That would fall there. Private grants from sources like scholarships or other agencies, that's only about 7%. And you can see loans represent a fairly sizable portion. Loans altogether were about a third of the money that's available in the form of financial aid, from non-federal loans, federal student loans, federal parent loans. VA benefits, about 6%. Great question. I got asked, what is a grant? So just to answer that, again, grant specifically means money that does not have to be repaid. So in that situation, grant money is the best kind of money you're going to get. It's money you don't have to repay. So that's really what you want to see. But you'll see types of funding about, a third, 2/3 of the money comes in the form of grants, a little less than a third in the form of loans. And the last piece I'll talk about here is education tax benefits.
I'm in a meeting. Stop.
Sorry, so it sounds like we're having a little bit of challenge. Keisha, can you answer? Can you see the slide I'm on, or are you only seeing the first slide?
Okay.
Only the first.
I can see the overview.
You can. I'm not sure. Some folks are having the first slide only as an issue. So I might suggest if that's the case, you refresh.
No, that's my teacher. I can't hear you.
Okay, so moving on, right? What you see here on the pie chart is really some good information about what's available. The other thing is you'll see at the bottom of the pie chart a link to my blog. So there's a whole entry on this on the blog page, and you can take a look there. Now, I'm getting the same sound issues that some of you are as well. Again, I'm going to ask, please.
No, I'm listening to my teacher reading.
I'm going to ask you if you're not on mute. Whoever just said that, there we go. Let me mute you. Okay, hold on. Okay, so let's move on. So second slide, is it worth it, right? So there is, the expense is a lot. Some of you pointed out it's a lot of money. It could be upwards of $300,000 for 4 years in college. Is that worth it? Is it worth it to pay all that money to go to college? And I want to argue that it is, but I want to give you some information to prove that it is. And let's look first at this slide. What you see here is earnings and unemployment by the level of education. So you can see the higher you get in your educational career, the less likely you are to be unemployed. And these data come from last year, from 2020. You can see in 2020, for those with a less than a high school diploma, their chances of being unemployed was 11.7%. With a high school diploma, 9%. And over time, as you move up the educational journey, you can see your chances of unemployment definitely drop. But what raises also on the blue side of this chart is your income. So this is average income by week, by education level. So you can see that just simply getting your associate's degree already raises your weekly income on average nationwide. And actually the impact in Florida is even higher. And I want to show you that in just 1 second. But before we get there, the other thing I want to point out is this. So this chart shows you the unemployment rate over time for the last 20 years based on educational level. The top line here is people who have less than a high school diploma. So you'll see with less than a high school diploma what the unemployment rate has hovered at. It's been as high as 20-something%. And look, even after the pandemic, the recovery hasn't quite been as quick for those with less than a high school diploma. The lighter blue line is people who have a high school diploma but no college. The darker blue line, people who have some college or an associate's degree. And the green line is those with a bachelor's degree or higher. So you can see, again, over time, the economic value of getting that bachelor's degree in terms of the employment likelihood. The other thing I want to say is, what about Orange County? So what do we know about Orange County? In Orange County, this is pretty amazing. So these data come from the Florida College Access Network. If you look on the bottom left, you can see that just simply getting your vocational certificate moves you about $10,000 a year up in the average salary range. Getting your associate's degree doubles you from your high school diploma alone. And you can see the effect over time, bachelor's degree and master's degree. Our county has one of the highest rates in the state of Florida. We are fifth among all counties in Florida for college attainment. We're at 47.8%, but there's room to grow. And again, I'll compare 25 to 34-year-olds versus those who are 25 to 64, right? Our younger have a higher chance of having that degree. So there's definite value to getting the degree. I don't want to ignore the fact, though, that we do see differences in racial and ethnic makeup. And this is a challenge that we need to work through. We need to make sure opportunities are available for folks of all backgrounds. And so that's a piece that we focus at Valencia on, and I know many of our peer institutions are doing that as well. Okay, so let's do some pretty quick vocabulary. So I want to draw your attention to three terms, and those three terms are cost of attendance, which is COA, expected family contribution, which is EFC, and then need, or financial need. I want to define these for you. So cost of attendance is our first term. What does cost of attendance mean? Cost of attendance is the amount to attend an institution for a year. It's an average cost that the financial aid office will determine for students by category. And that includes not just tuition and fees that you pay directly, but also those expenses that are what we call indirect expenses. So things like books. You don't pay books necessarily to the college. You might buy the book at the bookstore. You might buy the book on Amazon. If you live at home, housing and meals, or if you rent an apartment, housing and meals aren't necessarily billed by the college, but they are expenses that form part of your cost of attendance. Transportation expense, another example, getting back and forth to campus. So when we talk about large numbers, and I'll share with you, a year at Harvard these days is close to $80,000, and we'll see that in a moment. But when we talk about that $80,000, it's not like you're going to write a check to Harvard for $80,000 if you paid all of it. Most of you will never pay all of it. But if you did and you could afford it, it's not like you write a check for $80,000 to Harvard, right? The reality is that a lot of that expense is what we would categorize as indirect expenses or non-billed expenses. But when we determine your financial aid, we look at all of your expenses because it's a reflection of what the cost is for you as a family. And I'll give you some sample costs on the next slide. The next figure we want to talk about, though, is your expected family contribution. What is that? That's the number that the government determines you can afford to help pay for college. And that's determined by a formula. We're going to talk a little bit about that formula tonight. And I'm going to give you a really quick way for those of you that are younger than your senior year to find out what your number is, because that's important for you to know. What is my family's expected family contribution? What does the government formula think I can give toward college? And the difference between those two numbers is that eligibility for financial aid, which we call financial need. It's the money we need to see if we can help provide to you to help you pay for college. So here are some sample costs of attendance. These are all for 21-22. And as I said before, you can see on the far right of the chart, Harvard is listed there with an expense at $78,028 a year. That's if you live in Cambridge. If you have to travel, they actually add the cost of your airfare back and forth to campus as well, twice a year. So that gives you a sense of Harvard, MIT, Emory. I picked Stetson. I could have picked University of Miami. They both have relatively large or higher costs of attendance. What do you notice when you get to Bethune-Cookman? Notice you have two different costs of attendance. Why is that? Well, at some institutions, they have a different cost of attendance if you live in a dorm or you live off campus locally versus if you live with your parents or a relative. If you live with a parent or a relative, they're figuring you're not paying rent, and therefore your costs are lower. So at Bethune-Cookman, you'll see they have two different costs of attendance for a year. One, if you're living on campus or off campus in an apartment of your own. and a different one if you're living with family members. Then you can see at FAMU and colleges to the left on this chart, Orange Tech, FSU, UF, UCF, Valencia, you can see that the line breaks up into 4. Why is that? Well, all of those colleges are public colleges. At public colleges, your tuition, if you're an in-state resident, is subsidized heavily by the state of Florida. So, for example, if you were to go to the University of Florida and you lived on campus, right, you would pay $21,430. But if you lived off campus, if you were an out-of-state resident, rather, if you weren't a resident of the state of Florida, your costs would be $22,000 more. You'd be paying twice as much just because you're living out of state and you're coming to Florida for college. So what's the really important message here? The really important message here is you want to find out if you qualify, and you want to make sure you qualify for in-state residency, especially if you go to one of those colleges that is a public college. And Carol, yes, it's $21,000 a year at University of Florida, at least for right now. Every year the cost of attendance adjusts, but for right now, $21,000 a year. So again, you want to make sure that you qualify for residency in state. And for our typical senior in high school, it's not going to be based on you, it's going to be based on your parents. Are your parents residents of the state of Florida? Can they prove that? Do they have a driver's license that proves they're a resident of the state of Florida? Do they have a lease? Do they have a car registration? All of that typically goes through the admissions or registrar's office, not the financial aid office. We don't handle residency. But it's really important that you document your residency if you're going to a public college so that you get that large subsidy. Really important. Okay, so let's say you're applying to 5 different colleges, and I want to show you what this impact is. And let's say the colleges vary in cost from about $70,000 at the high end to about $10,000 at the low end. And you apply for financial aid, and we figure out that your EFC, your expected family contributions, about $10,000. As you can see from the chart, that would be the same EFC no matter which college you went to. $10,000 at college A, $10,000 at college B, etc. There might be slight differences, but this is just an example to show you. And you're going to qualify for financial aid potentially for the rest of that, right? I'm going to give you some suggestions on how to maximize your aid, but you would qualify for financial aid for the rest of that money. So the idea here is you should be able to choose a college because it fits a match with you, not because it costs more or less. It's going to be based on your EFC, your family contribution. So even if you go to college A and you get all the financial aid you qualify for, you'd still only be paying $10,000, the same amount as you'd pay if you went to college E. Oops, sorry. So just as we wrap up this section, just remember, the price is not your cost, right? The sticker price is what we call the cost of attendance. But your net price or your true cost is going to be what you pay after you receive the financial aid you qualify for. So one challenge is, let's say all of us walked over or went over to Best Buy or Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever, and we all decided we're going to buy the same television. All of us were going to buy the same television set. Chances are, unless one of us had a coupon or a discount, we'd all pay about the same price, right? We all pay the same cost for that television set. The challenge about college is that if all 130 of us got into the same college, we'd all pay a different amount. The cost is different. The price might be the same, but our cost is going to be different. So how do you figure that out? Well, we're going to talk about a strategy a little later so you can get an estimate of what your family contribution is. But before we get there, I want to just mention, because this question came up, what are the different kinds of financial aid? There are 3 kinds of financial aid. The first one is grants or scholarships. This is the best kind of financial aid. This is financial aid you do not have to pay back, right? You're going to want that in every case. Usually grants are based on need, and scholarships are based on some kind of academic or athletic or musical talent, some talent-based award. Typically, grants are need-based only, scholarships based on talent. That's the best kind of money to receive. Loans are the second kind of funding. Now, many families don't think about loans as a kind of financial aid, but they are. And loans aren't necessarily a bad thing. I know we hear a lot these days about the problem with student loans. There's too much money in student loans, and that is all true. But how do you know how much is too much? Right? Where is the right level for you to limit your loans to? As a student, the advice from financial advisors is by the time you graduate college, you should have no more in debt, total debt, from all sources than you think your starting salary is going to be. So let me give you an example. Let's say, sorry again, Armand, I'm going to ask if you could mute, please. Thank you. So again, if let's say you decide you're going to go to college to be an elementary educator, that's your dream. And I'm going to make up some numbers. Let's say you figure out as you look through the process that elementary educators earn on average, I'm making this number up, when they start $25,000, right? And you've determined that. What's important is when you start thinking about how much is too much to borrow, you don't want to borrow more than that $25,000 if that's what the expected starting salary is for you once you graduate college. Now, does that mean you should borrow $25,000? No. If you can borrow less, borrow less. But it's not unreasonable. You will find it affordable to repay, and that's including all of your debt. So remember, that also includes, your credit card debt, your car loan debt, whatever other debt you might have. If you're going to be an engineer, maybe you go and do the research and you figure out, you know what, engineers earn about $50,000 a year. Does that mean you should borrow $50,000? No, but you could, right? You have the capacity if needed. Yeah. You have the capacity if needed to borrow up to that amount if necessary. So again, gives you some idea of how to manage your expenses. So what about work? Work is the third kind of financial aid. A work award is going to be offered to you in something called federal work study. Some of you will receive an offer in federal work study or institutional work study. It's an opportunity for you to earn money in a job on campus. If you're offered work study, you can then find a job at the local school and work when you're not in school or not in class, a couple of hours here, a couple of hours there, and get paid. One work opportunity that's available through work study that many families don't remember or don't realize is something called community service work study. Let's say you're passionate about a particular community service opportunity, and throughout your high school career, you've been volunteering at this organization. When you get to college, you can actually be paid to volunteer. That sounds weird, but you can be paid to do that same volunteer at that same type of institution or outside organization, and the college will pay you a wage to be able to do that. So just an FYI, again, think about that as something to consider. In addition, by the way, a great place on campus to work is at the financial aid office. So the financial aid office always hires work study students as well. In fact, many of us working in this career got our start working in the financial aid office. Okay, so let's move on. So what forms do you need to know? So I'm going to ask for someone to type, any senior who wants to volunteer, type me in the chat. If you're a senior in high school, type me, the word me. Great, Natalia, I found you first. Natalia, can you do me a favor? Natalia, can you this is when you're going to be allowed to unmute. So Natalia, can you unmute and say hello?
Hi.
Hi, am I saying your name right, Natalia?
Yeah, you're saying it right.
Awesome. So Natalia, tell me what college, you're a senior, congratulations.
Thank you.
What colleges are you planning on applying to?
UCF and USF.
And?
Well, I'm already in Valencia for dual enrollment.
Awesome. So we'll put Valencia in there too. Thank you.
Yeah.
And pick a dream school. What's your dream school?
I don't really have one.
Okay. So do you mind if I throw in Stetson just for fun?
Yeah.
Okay. So I got 4 colleges. I've got UCF, USF, Valencia, and Stetson. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we have 4 colleges. Here's my question for everyone on the line who is not Natalia. How many financial aid applications will Natalia and her family have to complete? Type your answer in the chat. So I got 1, I got 4. All of you who are saying 1, unfortunately, you're not correct. 4 is also not correct. Natalia, you have any guess? How many financial applications you're going to have to do?
2, maybe?
So believe it or not, it could be as much as 7.
Oh.
So I'm going to look. Karina says 20. So let me talk about what they are and why we get there. So Natalia, stay with me, okay? And
All
your
right.
job is every time I ask for a date, you're going to give an answer. And what's the answer? Look on the slide. October 1. So every time I ask you for a date, you're going to say October 1, okay?
Okay.
Okay, awesome. So the first application, and probably most of you were thinking this when I asked this question, the first application is the FAFSA. The FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It is a free application. You do not have to pay to use it. And Natalia is going to fill that out. And it's required by every college. So because I made her apply to 4 colleges, she's going to list all 4 colleges on that FAFSA. And she's going to fill it out once a year. Every year, she's going to do a FAFSA. Each year that she's in college, or in graduate school for that matter, she'll do a FAFSA. It is free. You can do it online at fafsa.ed.gov, or if you have your cell phone, you can do it on your phone as well using an app called the My Student Aid app. If you download that app from the App Store, you can do it right online. And Natalia, when does the FAFSA go live?
October 1st.
You are brilliant. That is absolutely right. I don't know how you knew that. So yes, the FAFSA goes live on October 1. And that's why we're doing this session today. What do we know about October 1st? The sooner you do the FAFSA, the more likely you are to get financial aid. Now, that's not to say, you have to do it on October 1st at 12:01, midnight in the morning. You can wait. But you want to get it done in October or November if you can. The reason is this. Colleges do give money away first come, first serve. There are some programs they have where they run out of money, and they're going to give priority to students who apply early. So you want to get it done as soon as you can on or after October 1st. Natalia, do you have a sibling?
I do.
And how old are they?
20.
Okay, so are they already in college?
No, she's currently working.
Okay, so let's say she decides to go back to college next year, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen in your family? You're going to do 2 FAFSAs, right? So it's 1 FAFSA per student per year. If you have a parent who decides they want to go to college, they'd have to do a FAFSA. So each member of your family who wants to go to college has to do their own FAFSA. Got a great question from Chase who says, what if you don't know if you're admitted yet? Should you list the college on the FAFSA? Or should you wait until you're admitted? No. Put your application in early and list the colleges you're thinking you're going to apply to. Doesn't matter if you don't wind up applying to them, but list every college you might apply to up front. You want to make sure you get your application in as early as possible. So Natalia, we've got 1 FAFSA so far. Are you ready to move on?
Yep.
Okay. What's the next application? It's called the CSS Financial Aid Profile. The CSS Financial Aid Profile is not needed by every college. Only some colleges need this. And it's mostly colleges that are private colleges that have a lot of their own money to give away. Of the 4 colleges I named, which one of them is private college?
Stetson.
You remember? Say Stetson.
Stetson?
Yes, that's right. Stetson's a private college. So Stetson would need the profile. profile is a paid form. You have to pay to use the form. If you earn less than $100,000 a year in income as a family, it's free. But if you earn more than $100,000, you do have to pay to use the form. And so that information is available at the CSS profile website, and you can find it here. Because I made you apply, and I know you're not really going to do it, but since I made you apply to Stetson, or for those of you who are looking at Harvard or Yale or any private college that has significant resources, then you're going to need to think about that CSS profile. And remember, I said the largest source of grant money is institutional grant. If you don't fill out the profile and the college requires it, they will not give you institutional grant. So I want to answer some questions that are coming in on the chat. So how many schools can you list on the FAFSA? Up to 10. If you're applying to more than 10 colleges, there is a workaround. You can read about that on my blog. But essentially you do the first 10, then replace it with the rest of them. International colleges that offer federal financial aid can be listed on the FAFSA. You have to contact the college and find out what they use. For the CSS profile, the adjustment of $100,000, I believe, is total income, not AGI. And again, FAFSA, yes, you apply to every college on the FAFSA. There's a question, how do you know if your college requires a CSS profile? Go to this link, and I could click on it, but because I'm not sharing my whole screen, you won't see it. But it does provide you information about which schools require the CSS profile. And FAFSA is eligible nationwide. It's not Florida only, it's any college in the country and some colleges overseas as well. So we've got, Natalia, one FAFSA, one profile. Now, I made you apply to 4 colleges, so it's possible that those 4 colleges will have their own financial aid application. And in fact, I know about 2 of the colleges you're thinking about going to or might go to, and they definitely have their own financial aid application. So UCF, which you mentioned, UCF has a scholarship application. And if you don't fill out their scholarship application, there's some scholarships UCF considers you for in the admissions process. So they might give you a president's scholarship if you're one of their highest admissions candidates. But they have other scholarships that they award that they use their application process for. And you have to fill out that application for them to consider you. At Valencia, we do something very similar. We have a very large foundation, the Valencia College Foundation, that provides a lot of scholarship money every year, but it only goes to students who fill out our scholarship application. And a lot of students miss this. A lot of students only do the FAFSA, even though we ask them and tell them about the scholarship application. So you want to find out from each college, do they have a scholarship application? And if they do, how do you access it? So let me ask you a couple questions, Natalia. When does the CSS financial aid profile go live?
October 1st.
You are awesome. That's exactly right. And when do you think the institutional applications go live?
October 1st.
Yeah, so that was a trick question. I don't know. Usually October 1, but some colleges may have their own go live date. So just find out. I know at Valencia, for example, we don't tend to open up till January. So just be aware that generally colleges will start on about October 1, but not necessarily. So you're not quite done. We had 4 institutional applications, 1 CSS profile, 1 FAFSA. We haven't talked about Florida financial aid. So in Florida, there are over 14 different state grant scholarship and work programs. What do you think the biggest scholarship program is in Florida, Natalia?
The Bright Future Scholarship.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And here's the mistake that people make. A lot of people assume if they don't qualify for Bright Futures, they shouldn't fill out the Florida financial aid application. That's dead wrong. Here's why. There are 14 grant programs and work programs and scholarship programs in the state of Florida, and you need to fill out that Florida financial aid application to qualify. So there is an application. It opens on what date?
October 1st.
You are amazing. Yes, that's right, October 1st. And you can do this application in your high school. Most of you will do this as part of your senior year in your English class or in your social studies class. It'll be part of something you do right on campus in the high school. You have to do this your senior year, even if you think you're going out of state. Let's say you've decided, I'm never staying in the state of Florida. I'm never staying here for college. Do this application anyway. Because once you graduate high school, if you change your mind, you can no longer access this application. So you need to do this application even if you think you're going out of state. The other thing I'll tell you is if you're applying for admission and you're convinced you're coming to a state college like Valencia or like St. John's River or like any of the others, right? And or you think you're going to a private university in Florida, like you're going to go to University of Miami or Rollins or Stetson. If you're Bright Futures eligible and you plan on attending a college that isn't one of the state universities, you still need to send your test scores to a state university if you're going to be Bright Futures eligible. Otherwise you will not, they will not get your ACT and SAT scores. So make sure that when you register for the ACT or you register for the SAT, or if you've already taken it, that you call them to make sure one of the state university schools, one of the universities of, is actually one of the schools you're reporting your scores to. Some of you have said, how do I find out more about this? So this application is called the Florida Financial Aid Application, and you can access it at their website, which is at floridastudentfinancialaid.org. If you're no longer in high school and you're taking only dual enrollment courses, you can actually go in and complete the application after October 1 yourself. There is no citizenship status requirement for Bright Futures, and that's not true, sorry. You do have to be a permanent resident or U.S. citizen to qualify for Bright Futures, but you can be a permanent resident and qualify for Bright Futures. That is correct. So again, that's the information. Service hours and those pieces, I would contact them directly. I'm not an expert on service hours, but I will say you can do your service hours after the application is submitted. The application just gets your record started. Okay, Natalia, so you did such an amazing job. Thank you for playing with me. Let's do the math together. This is simple math. If I add 1 and 1 and 4 and 1, what do I get?
7.
Yeah, well, see, you can graduate high school right there. So yes, 7 is the maximum number of applications you would have to do with 4 colleges. So thank you for playing. You can go ahead and mute yourself again. I hope that was fun. Yeah, thank you. That was awesome. Okay, so let's keep on going. So once you're eligible for Bright Futures, if your parents move out of state, that's not a problem. But you have to prove you're a Florida resident at the time that you qualify. Okay, so how do you sign your application? Right, so we talked about all these applications. You have to sign them, but they're all electronic. So for the federal government, you're going to have something called an FSA ID, or a Federal Student Aid ID. This is used for all federal student aid websites. And you'll set up one for a parent and a different one for the student. And so as a result, that will be sort of like a combination of a username and a password. So the username, just like when you log into the bank or you log into one of those situations like the bank or a credit card, you'll use a username and password very similar for the FSA ID. And you want to make sure you keep reference of that. You can use that to sign your Fafsa. You can use that to sign up for student loans. And you set that up at fsaid.ed.gov. Parent and student have to have a different email address. Can't be the same email address. And when you set this up, you want to make sure you set this up with your valid Social Security number. You can make a mistake on almost anything else, but not your Social Security number. Make sure that you use your valid Social Security number. If you don't know it, look it up, find it. Also, for those of you that have complicated names or multiple last names, so if your name is Hernando Gonzalez Garcia, right, when you fill out the FAFSA, you want to make sure that you use that complete name, Hernando Gonzalez Garcia. So if that's what's on your Social Security number, make sure that that is what you write on your FSA ID. They need to match exactly. And that should also match what you do when you file for admission. When you file your admissions application, use your exact name as well. For those of you looking for a copy of this presentation, I will post it to my blog at the end of tonight, so you'll be able to download a copy there. And again, at moneymanblog.com. That's where it will be. Okay, so FSAD on FAFSA, they might do in your school, but generally I would say you would apply for that at home. And I'll give you some references tonight for help sessions as well, if you need help completing them. Here's my big joke for the evening. I appreciate laughter, even if you type it in the chat. Here's my big joke is it's not a parent who's a parent. Okay, never mind. The humor may not play virtually. What do I mean by that? Thank you, Nichols. I appreciate it. What I'm referring to is divorced or separated families, right? If you are from a divorced or separated family, who fills out the FAFSA? Let's talk about that. If you, the student, live with one of your parents, not the other, then it is that family that is the custodial family. That's the family you're going to fill out information about on the FAFSA. It's going to be that parents. Let's say I'm the student, my parents are divorced, I live with mom. When I put information about mom or about parents, it's going to be mom. I'm not going to answer information about dad. It's only going to be about mom that I answer questions on the FAFSA, right? So again, it's the custodial family. Let's say mom is remarried. Let's say I live with mom and stepdad. Then stepdad's information is also required on the FAFSA. It's that whole family I live with that I'm going to enter on the FAFSA. What if I share time between mom and dad's house and I'm equally divided between the two of them? Then what happens? Then the question becomes, who provides more financial support? Do I get more money? Who pays more for my cost of living? Do I get more from mom or from dad? That's the household that I use as my household. Keep in mind, by the way, it never asks who claims you on a tax return. It's not about that. It's about who do I live with?
Yeah.
Or who gives me more financial support? If I'm applying to private colleges, sorry, again, if you're not on mute, can you please mute yourself? Thank you. If I'm applying to private colleges, some private colleges may ask for information from my non-custodial parent, right? So in that situation, if you're applying to a college like Harvard or Yale or those situations, those colleges may ask you to provide information about the parent you're not living with. If that's the situation, it's only going to be for private colleges that have their own money to award. Again, just keep in mind, if that's a situation for you and you're not in contact with that other parent, you can always ask for a waiver. So let's say you're applying to Harvard, because I know Harvard requests this information, and you live with mom, but it's been a messy divorce and you're no longer in contact with dad. Harvard usually wants dad's information, but you can provide documentation to show that you're not in contact with dad. They will waive that requirement. But that's only for Harvard. For FAFSA, for most colleges, for federal funds, they only require information about the family you live with. Now, I'm going to go on to talk about what happens if you're not living with either parent or you don't talk to either parent. I'll get to that in a second. But stay tuned. So there are a lot of changes coming to financial aid. At the end of 2020, there was a major bill passed that changed a whole bunch of things in financial aid that are changing in 24-25. So for those of you that are freshmen, or even for those of you that are seniors, you'll want to come back and hear the changes for 24-25, and I'll do that session in 2023. Okay, so what year's information are you using? Let's talk about that. So remember the FAFSA, thanks to Natalia, we know the FAFSA goes live on October 1st. At that point, we don't have your 2021 income. So the only income we have, the most recent income, is your 2020 tax year. So when you fill out the FAFSA, you're going to use your income from the 2020 tax year. Now, at the same time, you're going to use your asset and your family information as of the day you file the FAFSA. But your tax information is only available for 2020. What do we know about that? Well, let's say you earned that income in 2020, you filed your tax return up through April of 2021. you're now filing your FAFSA. The school year doesn't start until next August or September, August of 2022. That's a long time from the time you earned that income. What happens if something changed? Let's say, for example, you lost a job, right? We're in the middle of this pandemic. There's been lots of income adjustment. What if you lost a job? Or what if, God forbid, a parent passed away or something major happened? What do you do then? In those situations, colleges have what they call a professional judgment. They have the ability to make changes based on your personal circumstance. And I would highly recommend you look at this blog entry from April of 2020, April 6th of 2020, where we talk about the unexpected, preparing for the unexpected, using professional judgment. And you'll read about how colleges make those adjustments on a one-by-one basis for families with special circumstances. Jose asked a question, what's the income requirement for FAFSA? I think that means what's the income limit for FAFSA? There is no income limit. There's no maximum income, right? The reality is every college is going to use the FAFSA a different way. So some will use it to make financial aid awards that are based on need. And we'll talk about this in a moment. Some will use merit. But you should do the FAFSA if you think you're going to need help paying for college. And even if you don't, you should still do the FAFSA. Why? Because God forbid something happens, you'll have that information in by the deadline. So again, if something unexpected happens, you'll be able to rely on that FAFSA information. So how does your tax information get onto your FAFSA? All of you will have the opportunity, if you filed a U.S. tax return, to link your information directly from the IRS to the FAFSA using something called the data retrieval tool. You can link it if you're a parent or if a student. You can directly link it right over. And the reason you want to do that is because it's easier than typing in the information from your tax return directly, but also because you will be less likely to be selected for something called verification. And we're going to talk about that next. Verification is a process the U.S. government uses to prove the information you put on your FAFSA. About 35% of applicants nationwide are selected. And if you're selected by the government for verification, you have to document what you put on the FAFSA and before you can get financial aid. So we'll ask for copies of your tax returns if you haven't already used the data retrieval tool. So again, that's why I suggest using that data retrieval tool. We may ask you to complete a verification form or worksheet. We may ask you to prove your identity by giving us a copy of your passport or your social security card or your driver's license. You may have to prove your immigration status or that you graduated from high school. So again, that's what's verification. And if colleges request that of you, they're not being mean. It's because they're required to by the federal government and you were selected for verification. It's a randomized selection. So we talked about merit and need. So how does the money get awarded? So most of the money that's available in the form of financial aid gets awarded on the basis of need. 96% of the money out there. But a lot of you may qualify for merit-based money. Merit-based money like Bright Futures. In Florida, Bright Futures is a merit-based program. There's no income requirement. You could earn lots of income or no income. And as long as you qualify for Bright Futures, you're going to get that, right? But other than Bright Futures, most merit programs, most state programs are not merit-based. Private funds might go to merit. And again, they're given for academic, athletic, or other talent. But most money is going to be given on the basis of need. And that need formula is that cost of attendance minus EFC that we talked about before. Some colleges, though, will use what I call merit within need. And I'm going to give you an example of this in a second on this chart. So what I want you to think about is the old story about the college professor who decides how to grade her papers by standing at the top of the set of stairs and throwing the essays down the staircase. And if it's a heavy essay, it lands right in front of her. So she knows that person put a lot of work into the essay, so they get an A. And if it lands all the way down the bottom of the staircase, chances are it's a lightweight paper, and that student gets an F, right? So what does that have to do with financial aid? What I want you to think about is that staircase and ranking. When you apply for admission, many colleges, unless they're an open access school like Valencia, but if it's not an open access school, many colleges will give you an admissions ranking. That ranking determines how desirable you are to the institution. So let's say you have a ranking of 1, you're a top admit. You're going to be admitted no matter what, they want you there. Chances are you're going to be given a merit scholarship if they have that. A 2, still likely admit, top admit. A 3, good admit. A 4 or 5, likely to be admitted. A 6, maybe you'll be put on wait list. A 7, 8, 9, 10, you're not going to be admitted. Right? So that's how the admissions cycle works for colleges that have a limited number of spots and are not open access institutions. Some of those colleges use that ranking to also determine how much financial aid you're going to get. So when it comes to their own money, they're going to give more money, not every college, but some colleges, to folks who are higher on that ranking list. So what does this mean for you as a student or as a family thinking about college? When you put your college list together, I know your high school guidance counselor often talks about having an academic safety, right? A safety school and a dream school. I used this language with Natalia earlier. What's your dream school? The dream school is a school that you would love to get into, but it's a bit of a reach for you, right? It's a reach for you because you don't quite fit their profile. You might not be a number 1 at their school, but maybe you're a 6 or a 5. That's your reach school. That's your dream school. Probably many of you think about an academic safety where you're likely to be, a top admit. But I'm going to also suggest that you think about a college where you're going to be a top recruit for them, right? If you are going to be a top recruit for that college, chances are they're going to put some money on the table to try to get you to come to that institution, right? So again, you want to make sure that as you think about your college mix, you include an institution where you're going to be the reach for that college, because that college is likely to offer you what I call merit within need or merit-based money. They're going to make the pot sweeter for you to try to encourage you to come. I'm a parent of 2 kids in college. One's done, one's still in college. Both of my kids were given merit-based awards because they were very careful about targeting schools where they were a reach, where the school wanted them. And it worked out very successfully for them. So we're going to talk now about the golden rule. And the golden rule is that she who has the goal makes the rules. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to talk about the rules that go into figuring out, and I apologize for the dogs. There's some noise outside. We're going to talk about the rules that determine how much you're eligible for. So Jerry, we moved on. My suggestion is you might want to refresh or rejoin if you're still looking at the slide that says it's not apparent. So when you fill out the FAFSA, we collect all the information you give us, and what comes out of that is something called your EFC, which we've talked about, right? That EFC is used to award all federal aid. You have to file the FAFSA, and it uses both parent and student information for dependent students. But let's talk about what is a dependent student. So if you can answer yes to any one of these questions, you, the student, then you're what's called an independent student, and we don't need your parents' information. So if you're 24 years of age or older, if you're working on your graduate degree, master's or doctorate degree, if you, the student, are married, if you have kids, you have other dependents you support, if you're an orphan in foster care or ward of the court, if you're in legal guardianship, as determined by a court, if you're homeless or at risk of homelessness and unaccompanied, if you're an active duty member of the armed forces or a veteran, if any of those are true, then you're considered independent. Otherwise, we do require your parents' information. So even if you earn lots of money yourself as a student, if you're under 24, we still require your parents' information. That is a federal requirement. But what if your situation's unique? Let's say you're not in contact with your father. I'll give you an example. I have a student who is at Valencia who father is in jail and mother is a drug user and just not reliable, and student does not have any contact with mom. This student is 20 years old, independent. but doesn't qualify based on those federal guidelines. What happens then, right? In that situation, she would have to reach out to the college, or if this is you would have to reach out to one of the colleges you're thinking about applying to and ask to be declared independent. The college will require documentation from you, and then they can make you an independent student. In the meantime, you're going to fill out the FAFSA without your parents' information. You're going to say, I can't because I'm not in contact with them, and then we'll move forward from there. But a family saying, I just don't want to pay for college, that's not a reason to declare you independent. It's got to be something more serious, like a breakdown in your family relationship or something like that. If you have questions, I would recommend these two blog entries from September 14th of 2019, September 15th of 2019. We go into a great detail about how those dependency overrides work. And you can also reach out to me. I told you I'd give you my email by the time we're done tonight if you have questions. Okay, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but I want to just sort of highlight a couple of things for you here. This gives you some idea of how we determine what you're eligible for. And what I really want to draw your attention to is the asset question. So we look at both income and we look at assets. On the parent side, you can see the percentages. We don't look at home. Home is not an asset for the purposes of the FAFSA. We don't look at retirement. Current total retirement assets are not included. But we do look at how many are in your family and how many are in college. For right now, if you have multiple kids in college, your family contribution is divided by how many are in college at the same time. So let's say you're one of a set of triplets and all three of you are going to college at the same time. If your family contribution was $12,000, then it would be $4,000 per student, be divided by 3. And that gets you to the parent contribution. On the student side, you can see it's sizably higher, especially on the assets. So here's my question for you. If you have a lot of money in your name as a student, right, you might want to think about moving it before you file the FAFSA. And what do I mean by a lot of money? Not $100 or $1,000, maybe $10,000, right? If you have $10,000 in your name as a student, and you've been saving that money for college, 20% of that, or $2,000, is going to be considered each year just on its own as part of your contribution. So just be aware that that is important to understand, that that's an asset. Now I'll say, a lot of you are probably thinking, what about my Florida prepaid account? If I have a Florida prepaid account, whose asset is that? Generally, that is a parent asset, not a student asset, because in most cases, the parent is the owner, but the student is the beneficiary. So in that situation, it gets reported as part of parent assets, not as part of student assets. For some families, grandparents might own it, or maybe it was a gift from a foundation. In those situations, it's not reported on the FAFSA at all. So those parent contributions and student contributions together make up your EFC. Same with 529s, by the way. 529s are also in the parent's name, so they're parent assets. If you have a lot of cash in your name, a lot of assets in your name as a student, you want to talk to your tax advisor about what the implications are of moving it from a student to a parent, but you can certainly do that. And I would also keep in touch. There are changes coming in the next couple of years to this information, and just keep in touch because some of these rules are changing in 23-24 and 24-25. So what about institutional methodology? Some colleges have their own method of determining how to give out their own money, and generally those are the colleges that use the CSS profile. Those are often more strict than the federal methodology. They include home equity, but they give you allowances for things like medical expenses, or if you're paying for private school tuition, or those kinds of things. Those can be part of the institutional methodology. So you might have a different family contribution if you have the profile than if you have the FAFSA. And again, the colleges that use the profile come up with their own contribution for their own money that they use when they give out their scholarships or their grants. Okay, so if all of this confuses you, You're thinking, how do I figure out how much I'm going to pay? Really easy answer. There is what's called a net price calculator that's required of every college in the country. Every college in the country is required to put on their webpage a net price calculator. And that's an easy way for you to determine how much you're going to have to pay. You can enter some basic information, and it will return back to you an estimate of your EFC and your financial aid award. Be aware that, again, as I say on the slide, garbage in equals garbage out. You want to make sure you give good information so you get good information back. But every college in the country is required to have one. And if you go to this website, collegecost.ed.gov/net price, you can have a link to every college in the country's net price calculator. So for those of you that are juniors in high school or earlier, this should be part of your research. As you're thinking about colleges, go visit this site and look at the college's information to find out how much it might cost you right now. You can get an estimate of what it might cost you to go to that particular college, even multiple years in the future. Okay, how do I pay my EFC? Well, if you're like most families, when you see how much the federal government says your EFC is, you're going to laugh. You're going to say, there's no way. That's what I did when I saw my EFC. Many of you will do the same. What do you do in that situation? Remember, EFC is supposed to be a measure of your ability to pay for college over the course of a year. And for many of us, that might include our savings, that might include our current salary, or it might include borrowing a loan as a parent to help fund our students' education. My point of this slide, though, is not to rely just on one strategy. Don't jump to loan by itself. Many colleges offer payment plans where you can put part or all of what's left after financial aid on a monthly plan, paying it without interest over 10 months. When my daughter went to college, we used a combination of all three of these strategies. We had some money set aside in savings in a 529 plan. I used that money to help pay for college over the 4 years. I set up a payment plan. I paid every month a little bit toward the tuition and the bill so I could reduce that value. And I did borrow a small loan, and I'm going to be paying that loan back over time. But that was our sort of strategy for making sure that we could afford it. Don't necessarily just jump to borrowing it all, because obviously loans carry interest charges and it can be more expensive. Okay, we're going to do something fun, and then we're going to move to closing. But in the something fun, here's what I want you to do. I want you to fold your arms. Everyone fold your arms. Look down and see which wrist is in front. So which wrist is showing? As you look at your arms, which wrist is showing? For how many of you is that your left wrist? If you can type left in the chat, I'll know. Awesome. You guys are what are called visual learners. What's a visual learner? That means you process information by seeing it, right? So if, the fact that we have a PowerPoint is great for you because you appreciate that. If I were to, let's say, blank out the slide or minimize the slide, you'd be really in trouble because, again, your preferred modality is to see it. Chances are, if you're a visual learner, you like taking notes during a presentation because it helps you concretize, understand what it is you learned. You might love music as a visual learner, but music doesn't distract you, right? It's something you can have playing in the background while you're working. How many of you had your right wrist showing? And if we're doing this right, that should be all the rest of you, by the way. Just putting that out there. Good. You all with your right wrist, and Edward, stay with me for a second. You all with your right wrist, you're what's called an oral learner. You learn it by hearing it. So the fact that the audio might be glitchy for you is a real problem. So again, music is all encompassing for you. If you listen to music, that's all you're going to do is listen to music. You can't work at the same time. So other than Edward rather, who else did it not work for? So some of you, what I just described is not you. If that is true, then you're what's called a kinesthetic learner. You learn it by doing it. You have to jump in and actually do the process to learn it. and your preferred modality is to actually do the work. So after tonight is over, I'll be collecting resumes from those of you who are kinesthetic learners, because we'll have a job opening in financial aid, I'm sure. Just kidding. But you like to do it by jumping in and doing the work itself. This is my favorite part. Try to fold your arms the other way. How does that feel? Some of you are looking like this. What are you talking about? Fold my arms the other way. Weird, challenging, difficult, wrong. Yes, absolutely. Right. So that's like someone trying to teach you in a style that doesn't fit for you. So I'm going to start moving us to close. And again, I promised you 90 minutes. We're about 70 minutes in. So I've got just I've got 9 more slides left. And then what I'll do is open it up and we'll take questions, and I'll stay as long as you need for questions tonight. But let me give you, for those of you that are visual learners, a picture to keep in your mind of how financial aid works, to start to think about wrapping this up. For those of you that are oral learners, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to describe it. And for those of you that are kinesthetic learners, good luck. You'll just have to do it to figure it out. But let me tell you this story. So what I want you to picture is that I sit in my office at Valencia, and I'm surrounded by barrels. And every barrel represents one of our students. And my job as financial aid person is to help fill up the barrel. And at Valencia, it's not this case, but let's say at Valencia, it might take 15,000 coins to fill up the barrel. The example I've given you on the screen is 25,000. So at the college, we're using it as an example. It's going to take 25,000 coins to fill up that barrel. What's the first thing we're going to put in the barrel? What's the first kind of money we're going to drop in that barrel? Anyone have any ideas? First type of money we're going to put in there is that family contribution, that EFC, your money, right? What you can contribute to college. So that EFC in this case for this family is $5,000, right? So let's say the family contribution was $25,000 or higher. Let's say it was $50,000. Could that family qualify for financial aid? Not need-based financial aid, they wouldn't. Now, I will tell you, everyone can qualify for a direct student loan. The direct student loan is available no matter what. If there's room in the barrel, it's called subsidized, meaning that the government pays the interest while you're in school. If there's no room in the barrel, if you can't fit it in the barrel, but you have to take money out to make room, it's unsubsidized, meaning that you have to pay interest on that loan from the day the loan's dispersed. But every student can qualify for a direct loan. It's a small amount. It's about $3,500 the first year, $4,500 the next year, $5,500 year 3 and year 4, but that is available. So what comes next after EFC? Next comes gift aid. Remember we said gift aid was the best kind. So in this situation, this student was awarded a $7,000 grant and a $6,800 scholarship. So a total of $13,800. Next comes loan and work. So here's that $3,500 direct loan I was referring to and a $1,200 work study award. So what do you notice, right? What I notice is that this family doesn't have all of their barrel filled. There's still room at the top of the barrel. What we call that room at the top of the barrel is unmet need. The college was unable to fill their barrel. They didn't have enough money to fill the barrel for this student. So who has to pay that extra $1,500? You do, right? So in this situation, that family is really going to have to pay $6,500, $5,000 from the EFC, $1,500 in unmet need. Now, let's say this student goes off and gets a scholarship. Let's say they get $1,000 in scholarship from some private agency. Maybe they get it from the high school, maybe from Kiwanis, maybe from the Elks Club. What's going to happen to that scholarship? Where does that go? The first thing that's going to do is that's going to reduce the unmet need. So it's top of the barrel, there's room in the barrel, The college can fill that unmet need with a private scholarship. Let's say the student gets more than $1,500. Let's say she gets a total of $3,000. What's going to happen next? Well, once you fill that unmet need, you've got to start taking money out to fill up the barrel. So what's going to come out? What's going to come out next is work or loan, because that is next here. After all the work and loan is replaced, so let's say the student is really, really fantastic, and she's gotten, $7,000 of scholarship. So $6,200 has now been replaced. What's next? Grant. Grant or scholarship is going to be reduced. What is the very last thing that's going to be reduced by a scholarship? Your EFC. So just keep in mind that in most cases, the EFC is going to be the EFC no matter what. It's the rest of this that's going to be impacted. And I talk a lot about this on my blog, on this entry called Help, I've Been Displaced. You can get a lot more information about how the barrel works and how, in this example, right, a student who gets scholarship, what's going to happen, how those funds are used. Okay, so some insider tips. We're going to do a calendar. I'm going to give you some references, and I've also promised you my email address, so let's look at all of that. So here's some tips. Number one, find out the deadlines. If you make no other note from tonight, if you remember nothing else from tonight, you're going to remember these 4 words, and I'm going to type them in the chat. Never miss the deadline, right? Most important, never miss the deadline. Schools establish deadlines for financial aid. There's a reason for that, because they have limited funds. Those who apply on time get the limited funds. If you're late, you might not. Every college could have its own deadline. Some of them are hard and fast deadlines. Some of them are what they call priority deadlines. So you can still apply for financial aid later, but there won't be as much fund available to you. So you want to make sure you meet those deadlines. My advice, start an Excel sheet. Have a list of the colleges you're applying to, the forms that are needed, note the deadlines, and make sure you don't miss those deadlines. Keep copies of what you send. So when the college calls back and said, what did you mean by such and such? You'll have that information. If you have questions, ask them of me, of the college, of your high school guidance officer. Don't rule out a school just because of the cost, and make sure you look at all of your options for financing. So tonight we've talked about 3 major sources of financial aid: money from the federal government, money from the state government, money from college and universities. We haven't talked about these last 3: money from private agencies, professional associations, or perhaps your parents' employer. That's what's called outside scholarships or private scholarships. And there's a lot of money available. And I'm going to recommend a particular website called Fastweb.com. Fastweb.com has over 1.5 million scholarships listed on its webpage. That includes over $3.4 billion of funding. If you go to Fastweb, you can set up a profile, set up a unique email address, and find out about scholarships that you match. The more information you put in, the more information that they'll be able to use and match you to a scholarship. When my younger daughter applied for college, we created one for her. We put in that she's very tall, she's a female, she wanted to study theater, I'm a cancer survivor, we're Jewish. So all of these pieces of information we entered in, and what was 1.5 million scholarships became 40 scholarships that we would target, that we should look at. I will also tell you that many of these scholarships you can apply for as a freshman in high school, or a middle schooler, or a sophomore, or a junior. You don't have to wait to start this process. It's also not too late. You can still apply as a senior in high school or a college student as well. And I'll give you one last piece of advice around these scholarships. You want to have an essay that you are going to use as sort of a basis for those essay scholarships. Lots of scholarships have essay requirements, and the ones with essay requirements get less applicants. I did this presentation a couple years ago, and a mother came after me afterwards and said, you know what, I went to your presentation the year before, we followed your advice. My daughter applied for a scholarship. It was a $5,000 scholarship for 4 years, and she won it. And she said, my daughter thought, well, I wrote an okay essay, but it wasn't the best essay, I've ever written. And she called the scholarship provider and she said, can you tell me, why was I selected? And the scholarship provider said, you were the only one who completed the essay. So my advice to you is target those where if you put a little effort in, you'll get some return back. On my blog, I also talk about something called Poem, which is a way for you to understand what you should write about in your essay. And I'll just define it for you now. What I mean by poem, it's 4 letters, right? P-O-E-M. P is for passion. What is your passion? What's the thing that you're most passionate about? What gets you going? Is it tennis? Is it, is it music? Is it theater? Is it art? Is it whatever it is? What's your passion? That's the P. O is for opportunity, right? So where did you have an opportunity to express your passion? Maybe it's theater. Maybe you got involved in a local community theater production and you had a great time in that theater production. Okay. So once you have that, what was the experience? That's the E. So was it being involved in tech? Was it the rehearsal where you learned the choreography? Was it the time on opening night where the curtain went up? What is that opportunity? And then the last, or that experience rather. And the last piece is, what is the moment? What is the single moment in that experience that you want to write about where it reflects your passion, right? Was it when someone forgot their line and you jumped in to help save the scene? Or maybe it was when you forgot your line and someone jumped in to help you save the scene. That poem helps you bring down this idea of what to write about to something very specific. Admissions officers and scholarship providers want to read about something very specific. So use this idea of poem to help you get to that specific idea. What is the date for Fastweb? That question was asked. There is no particular date. It's open all the time. It's open now. Feel free to take a look at it. Okay, we're going to speed through the calendar. So what dates do you want to remember? So remember October 1, FAFSA CSS profile go online. November 1, lots of colleges who have early decision had their deadlines by November 1. Most college deadlines, though, are in February, January, maybe later. And for those who are on a regular calendar or a standard calendar, by April, you're going to get your admissions and financial aid decisions mailed from the college. If we go on in April, you're going to be making decisions about where you're going to go to school. By May 1, generally it's what's called the decision deadline. You need to let colleges know if you're coming or not. In May, you may have to pay a deposit to hold your spot. In June, you're going to get your bill for the fall semester. And don't forget, once you start your first semester, the October 1 comes again really fast, and you want to make sure you do that FAFSA, and if you need it, that CSS profile, as soon after or on October 1 as possible. Okay, so I've been asked to share the previous slide again with dates. There that is, Carla. If you want to take a picture, remember I'm going to post this to my blog by tomorrow, so you'll have the slides available there as well. Moneymanblog.com. Speaking of, where do you go if you need more help? So here are some reference points. FAFSA.ed.gov is the FAFSA website. The College Board's website's there. My Moneyman blog is there. FinAid.org. That's a great all-around information page. Has lots of information about financial aid, including some links to some other free scholarship searches. Take a look there. Every college's financial aid office has great information about its programs, and they can help you. And your high school guidance office has lots of experience with FAFSA, with helping students go to college. I also want to highlight for you an event that we call the FAFSA Frenzy at Valencia. At Valencia, every year we offer an event, and it's no trick. It is a treat. And so, as you can see on our little graphic here, we have 4 days in 21-22 where we're going to turn our office and make it completely open for you, right? We're going to help you apply for financial aid. Free appointments. You don't have to be going to Valencia. You don't even have to apply for admission to Valencia. It's a free event. We will help you step by step complete your FAFSA if you need that help. We'll answer questions for you. There'll be a FAFSA lab. It's all done virtually and it's all free. So even if you're in another part of the state, you can connect in. Those are the dates. We're doing a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, and a Thursday. And you can find lots of information by going to valenciacollege.edu/FAFSA Frenzy. And finally, here is my email address. So every year I give out my email address when I do these presentations. And I say to families, make me regret that I gave you my email address. Here's what I mean by that. If you have questions we didn't cover tonight, and chances are some of you do, email me. Email is my best way to communicate, or visit the blog, because chances are I've talked about the information on the blog as well. If you email me, that gives me a chance to email you back, and I can try to help answer questions for you. It also tells me what we didn't cover, right? Are there questions that you, offered in the email that helped me prepare for the next year? So with that, I am going to move to close. I'm going to stay around as I promised. So if you have questions, I am happy to answer your questions. I told you it was 90 minutes. We are right about at 90 minutes. So let's do this. I am going to stop the share. And I'll turn this over first to Keisha to see, Keisha, if there's anything you want to say before we move to questions and answers.
No, you covered everything. You did such a great job. Thank you so much. And once again, thank you everybody for staying on. We know it's a lot of information, but again, we are going to post this. This has been recorded, so you'll be able to see this. And if you are in Orange County, you can go to your high school's college and career specialist. They'll be able to give you tons of information, the things that we've been discussing today, and there will be FAFSA help sessions throughout the rest of the school year. So look out for that. I know someone asked about the FSA ID, and usually we try to help out our students in their classes. So we'll be doing that. But if for some reason your student misses that, they can always contact their college and career specialist, or they can also talk to one of their counselors. So thank you, Daniel. You did a great job. We appreciate you.
My pleasure, Keisha. There's some questions I'm going to highlight and answer. So again, I'll stay around. So let me try to answer some of these questions, and feel free to type your question in the chat. If you want to type it privately to me, you can do that too. So no one else can see the question. I won't identify who asked them. So one question comes in: what are some common mistakes that parents do when they fill out the FAFSA or the financial aid forms that we can avoid? One of them is often parents will answer the questions about the student about themselves. So make sure when it says you or your on the application, it's talking about the student, not about the parent. So that's a fairly common mistake. The other piece that I would advise is just be careful with your figures. Make sure that you're using, if you're not using the data retrieval tool, which I highly suggest you use, just make sure, double check your entries as you go. I know some families, the student is the driver, in some families the parent is the driver. My advice is do this together. This is a great opportunity to do some learning together about how the financing of this all works. I have a question: is it better to get a work-study job compared to a normal job? Well, like many financial aid questions, that answer is it depends. And let me explain why. The benefit of a work-study job, especially if you're living on campus, is that the work-study job is on campus. So you don't have to travel anywhere. You don't have to go off campus to get a job. You can roll out of bed and go to work. My older daughter was a lifeguard. She got paid work study to be a lifeguard. So she'd roll out of the bed in the morning, go to the swimming practice, be a lifeguard, go from there to class, come back and do a couple hours of work as a lifeguard, go home, have a meal, do some homework, and maybe, at night she'd do some lifeguarding hours. So, the benefit of a work-study job, A, is it's on campus, no transportation cost, and B, you can work shorter shifts than you might be able to get in a job at Publix or something like that, in those kind of information, those kinds of sessions or opportunities. Okay, let's see. Other questions that we have. Moving on through, and you're welcome, all of you are welcome. So Yes, let me do this. I'm going to offer again my email address. It's dbarkowitz@valenciacollege.edu. I will type that in the chat. And let's see.
I typed it for you.
Oh, you're so good. So a question was asked privately. I'm worried I might not be able to go to college as I want to go out of state. So remember again, if you're the person who typed that question, right, the idea of the financial aid is it's supposed to equalize the cost for you. So remember, if you're thinking about going out of state, the college knows that's going to be more expensive for you. I know some students who went to Harvard where it was cheaper for them to go to Harvard than it was for them to go to a UCF or a Valencia. But it really depends on your family contribution. So if you're that student, my advice to you is figure out what your family contribution is. If you're a zero family contribution, and there are a lot of families that are, right, it doesn't matter where you go, the financial aid will be available for you. You might wind up borrowing some loans, but there are some benefits to, institutions, depending upon the type of institutions they are. Speaking of, I had a question, what are some benefits of applying or going to an Ivy League school versus a Florida school? That's going to be very based on your determination as a student and a family. I know that Ivy League schools provide opportunities, or high-cost schools might provide opportunities that a lower-cost school might not. It really depends. What we do know is that going to college is the goal, right? Going and succeeding and finishing college is the goal. That's what's going to make the difference. Ultimately, as an undergraduate, where you went becomes less important than the fact that you went and finished. Graduate school can make a difference sometimes in terms of connections. I would also target or think about where do you want to wind up living after you graduate, because if you go to an out-of-state college, chances are you're going to make connections in that out-of-state location, and that's going to be where you wind up settling. Question, are there minimum scores students need to apply for FAFSA or other grants? There are not. Grants are primarily need-based. There are minimum GPA requirements for continuing to receive grant aid, and that's an average of a C. So you need to be maintaining a C average going forward, but there are no minimum scores coming in as you start college or information. Okay, other questions that you're seeing. Okay, great question. Christine asks, my daughter's in grad school, and when she did the FAFSA, her EFC was 0, but she received no aid or grants. Did we do something wrong? So sadly, Christine, you did nothing wrong. The answer is that for graduate school, the government has not put a priority behind federal grants for graduate school. Most of the funding available, or all of the funding available from the federal government for graduate school is in the form of loans. So unfortunately, if you're thinking about graduate school and you're getting federal aid, that's all you're going to receive. I will say institutions, though, offer tuition assistantships or fellowships or other kinds of research opportunities. Really, as a graduate student, you need to look at your institution as the main source of whatever grant funding you might get. So I would advise your daughter to talk to your institution to see what might be available. Question about the typical pay rate for work study. It's going to depend on the college. I know at Valencia we pay slightly above minimum wage, but not far above minimum wage. And so right now we're paying, I believe, somewhere in the range of $10 an hour, but that will increase as the minimum wage does with Florida as well. When should you expect to hear about what financial aid you've been awarded? Colleges will notify you first or at the same time of admission, and then your financial aid notification will come next. For colleges that operate on a sort of fixed decision point, like I know when I was at MIT, we always release decisions on Pi Day. Some of you are math nuts, you'll get this. Pi Day is 3.14, so decisions were released on March 14th. If you go a little further, it's 3.14159. So they would always release decisions on 3/14 at 1:59 p.m. That was when admissions decisions would be available for students. Ask the college. I know, for example, UCF does rolling admissions. They admit students throughout the cycle. So you want to ask the college, what is their admissions time frame? question about volunteer hours. I mentioned volunteer hours and the possibility of earning pay for that. So in answer to that question, remember that colleges can use their work-study money to provide something called community service work-study. And actually, colleges are required to spend 7% of the money the government gives them in federal work-study dollars to provide community service work-study. If that's the situation, your student wants to do that, they can work as a reading tutor or a math tutor or a volunteer with a local community organization and get paid to do that volunteer work an hourly wage. So get an hourly wage just like a job, but it will be in the form of community service work study. Other questions? I have a question from a parent who says, I feel sometimes because we've prepared by doing prepaid college and a 529, we don't qualify for need-based aid. Any thoughts about that? So first of all, remember the 529 plan and the prepaid college plan do not count against your need-based. They're part of your assets as a family, not part of your income. And assets are only included in the contribution at 6 cents on the dollar. So even if you've prepared by saving $100,000, and we should all be so lucky to have saved $100,000 for our kids' college, only $6,000 of that will wind up in your family contribution. So you're much better off having that resource. And remember that it's not alone going to limit how much you qualify for. I know another question we often get, by the way, is what if I qualify for Bright Futures and I have a Florida prepaid plan? Can I use both of them? And the answer is you can, right? The Florida prepaid plan and your Bright Futures are going to be based on your tuition amount, but they're not limited to paying only tuition. They're based on that amount. They credit to your student account, but they can be used to pay other expenses like housing or meals or transportation. So just be aware that if you have both, you can still use both. Keisha, any other questions you're seeing? I don't want to belabor folks' time, but any other questions you're seeing that we should address?